Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I will be sharing my time this evening with the member from Elgin, Middlesex, London. Madam Speaker, I'm pleased to rise today to speak to Bill C-65, an act to amend the... let's just fix that. An act to amend the Canadian Labour Code, the Parliamentary Employment and Staff Relations Act, and the Budget Implementation Act 2017, number 1. We all know harassment is serious, and it's a pressing matter that faces Canadian society today. It's good that this Parliament is debating legislation that will seek to address harassment in this very workplace and workplaces across Canada. Madam Speaker, harassment is a very volatile offence because it is not subject to whether the offender intends to harass or not. Irrespective of the intent, the mens rea of harassment, the act still harms the victim. This is why we must put a special emphasis on protecting victims' rights when implementing legislation aimed at stopping harassment. That's a conservative principle, Madam Speaker, and it's a principle that this government promised it would uphold. It is wonderful that we're enjoying a political system where every party seems to understand the gravity of harassment. But statements must lead to thoughtful action. Harassment is an evolving issue, and any legislation regarding harassment really needs to recognize this. It's vital that as parliamentarians, we understand that protecting people from harassment is a continual effort, as harassment comes in many forms, and unfortunately, no two cases are exactly the same, and there are always new cases emerging every day. In addressing harassment, all people who feel they have been harassed simply must and do deserve the right to be heard. As an example, Mr. Speaker, we have to bring into this conversation the fact that our Prime Minister, this Prime Minister, was alleged of sexual harassment. And even though he was alleged, he claimed that he had a different perspective than the accuser. This gave him the explanation he needed to protect himself. Madam Speaker, I believe that it is possible and even plausible that two individuals can have two completely different perspectives on an occasion. But it doesn't mean that one person's perspective is not real. Canadians, women, myself, were very disappointed in our Prime Minister not being upfront from the very beginning when this behavior came to light. It was disappointing in light of the young reporter's experience and immediate action that she took to put her experience on record with her colleague and in writing the article that our PM did not lead by example for others in his response. He truly should have apologized. The Prime Minister is the head of our country. He's the leader that insists that he is the ultimate feminist. And when you make a mistake, it's important to admit that mistake and to deal with it appropriately. Take every decisive action possible to apologize. And we have to take note that how he has treated his own circumstances is very different than how he treated those of members in this House who were simply accused and immediately faced repercussions. Well, in this particular case, Mrs. Knight chose not to pursue the matter any further, which is her right. However, due process should be afforded in every case out of respect for the accuser and the accused. We cannot rush to conclusions or opinions on matters that are so delicate. We cannot dismiss claims without a fair and honest investigation, nor can we be so quick to convict someone of a claim. We're living in an age, Madam Speaker, where the court of public opinion is quick to convict and doesn't often provide fair or accurate assessments of harassment claims. And that's why I am grateful that this Parliament is looking to enact legislation on workplace harassment and violence. We should be a true example to the rest of Canada, to the people that we represent, and certainly to our own families and our own children about what our priorities are and what we want to see them be for all Canadians. We need to ensure that there's a transparent process that respects the privacy of the victim, to assess harassment allegations. All people, irrespective of their gender, have a right to not be harassed at their place of work, period. And Mr. Speaker, we know that Madam Speaker, we know that even you as chair of this House take very seriously the responsibilities that employees of the House of Commons to ensure that they don't have to face harassment. But to everyone's chagrin, we still know that it is a reality here on Parliament Hill. Every parliamentarian in this House is an employer to staff, and it is incumbent upon us to ensure a harassment-free workplace. Each one of us within our own offices to do everything we can to make it a place that is a pleasure to come to work without any sense of apprehension or fear. As Canada's leaders, we must set the standard in ensuring that our employees have protection from harassment. And I believe that Bill C-65 is a step in the right direction. However, in formulating this bill, I do think the government dropped the ball in adequately consulting some stakeholders on this matter. The National Association of Women in the Law and the Native Women's Association of Canada both said that they were not consulted during the drafting of the bill. Both organizations represent important demographics in Canada, and I do believe that they could have contributed greatly in making this bill even better. I would implore this government to remember to consult with key stakeholders, as there is safety in a multitude of councillors, and Bill C-65 is all about making sure workers are safe. When we say we're going to consult, truly we need to be willing to consult people who agree with our perspectives, and possibly those who do not agree with our perspective and have things to offer that we have not thought about. And in that case, I believe that may be what happened here. Mr. Speaker, I will be supporting this bill, as combating harassment is a pressing need in Parliament and sets us on the path to safer workspaces all over Canada. Sexual misconduct and sexual harassment have no place in Canadian society, especially within our political system, actually, especially anywhere. And quite honestly, I feel that there's a lot more that we need to do as government to deal with sexual harassment beyond creating legislative environments for rules and regulations within this place. We should be setting examples in a lot of our policies that are coming forward from various committees, such as the status of women, where we put the value of women far higher on a pedestal than I believe it is being placed today. The bipartisan teamwork on the HUMA Committee between Conservatives and Liberals did prove that Bill C-65, if passed, it'll have a meaningful impact. Conservatives successfully introduced an amendment to avoid political interference in political offices during harassment investigations. Considering the sensitive nature of harassment claims, it's important that harassment investigations are not undermined by the perception of political interference or the actual interference. This was done by amending the law to have powers transferred from the Minister of Labour to the Deputy Minister, a non-partisan civil servant, in investigations involving the offices of members of Parliament. This preserves the integrity of the investigation process, and I'm proud of that amendment coming forward from us. The amendments to ensure strict timelines for investigations into incidents of harassment, to ensure investigations are carried out in a timely manner, also add to the integrity of the process. The introduction of mandatory sexual harassment training is an essential part of this bill. The preservation of the integrity of the process and the prevention of vexatious complaints are ensured by Bill C-65 by requiring such complaints be made within a prescribed time. I feel that this is a good move, Madam Speaker, and so pleased to see it in here, because we have to bring a balance to how we deal with these issues. We cannot afford for public opinion to be determining what is right and wrong. It has to be the rule of law that ultimately succeeds, or we find ourselves in chaos. Bill C-65 ensures a mandatory review of the bill will occur every 5 years. Bill C-65 would implement a fair and impartial process that would ensure the appropriate consequences would be applied to the offender. Therefore, I invite all members of this House to join me in support of Bill C-65 so that better protections from harassment for all Canadians are in place. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Questions?